I'm just serious, dude. You screw with me, you're gonna be in big ass trouble, okay? Don't smile at me, man. Okay? That's how people like you get shot. I got a bet. I bet by the time you're 21, somebody's full like in your head. Okay? And it might be me the one that does.
Umbrella. She's up. Whole nother level of shit you can't even understand.
What is good, my people? We are live back again with another episode of The Forecast. So out in Texas, a brother by the name of Lyndo Jones, who was unarmed, sitting in his own car, ended up getting shot by the police and was arrested and charged. So let's find out how somebody sitting in their own car could end up getting shot by the police.
Police in Mesquite are working to gather more information on an officer-involved shooting that started as a burglary call. CBS 11's Brittany Jeffers joins us live at police headquarters with the latest on the investigation and the suspect's condition. Brittany.
Russ, I just checked in with police and they tell me that they're going to spend the day going over body cam video, dash cam video, even checking nearby businesses to see if there's any surveillance that might help in this investigation. But they do say that that suspect continued to fight officers even after he was wounded and cuffed. Now, police were originally called out to the 1300 block of Southtown East Boulevard after someone in that industrial area reported that they saw a man trying to break into a vehicle. When the officer arrived, that suspect was sitting in a truck and the alarm was going off. Now, at some point, officers say that the two got into a scuffle. The officer fired his pistol, hitting the suspect. They say that man continued to fight even after additional officers showed up to help.
I think that I'm not an expert on human strength, but I think if after somebody has been shot and handcuffed and is on the ground, if it still takes 4 large men to hold him down, then that would indicate that maybe there's some other factors in play.
I'm also told that that suspect was taken to the hospital. He underwent surgery this morning and is stable, but at this point, his name as well as the officer's name have not yet been released.
Now, initially, according to the police, some random person called them because they saw a man what they thought was breaking into a car, which turned out to be his own car. And when Officer Derrick Wiley showed up, apparently he was sitting in his own car and his car alarm was going off and he couldn't get it to turn off. Now, I don't know how somebody sitting in their own car who probably just got off of work could end up trying to fight with the police, which would lead to him getting shot. What possibly could have gone down that quickly that led to this man fighting the police, according to their story, and them having no other choice but to shoot this man? And they say even after they shot him, he was still fighting with them. And after he was handcuffed, it still took 4 officers to get him detained. Now, according to what they said, the police have body camera footage, they have dash cam footage, because their story still doesn't explain how this man sitting in his own car could end up fighting with the police, getting shot, and still fighting while he handcuffed. And not only justify the shooting, but actually charge this man with fleeing officers or resisting arrest.
Police now speaking out today after one of their officers were involved in a shooting. Dan Haggerty joining us live over at police headquarters today with what else we know. Dan?
Yeah, a lot of unknowns. Let's start with what we know, though. We do know that last week, police thought Lindo Johnson was breaking into vehicles. We also know that when they found him, he wasn't breaking into vehicles. He was sitting in his own truck. We also know that police shot him and told us today he was evading arrest. What we still need to find out is the chain of events. What exactly happened that led to gunfire?
It's my understanding that the individual, once he was detained, he attempted to run away from the officer.
Mesquite police charged Lindo Jones with evading arrest for a situation that landed him in this hospital bed, shot by an officer who thought he was breaking into a truck that turned out to be his.
The situation was that Mr. Jones didn't give the officer ample opportunity to to start an investigation.
Jones's attorney says the investigation has been unconstitutional. The police interviewed Jones in the hospital today without allowing his attorneys to be there.
Our attorneys were actively kept from the room, and when we demanded to see the client and that the unlawful interview stop, we were forcefully removed from the campus.
Police explaining that he wasn't being interviewed as a suspect, but as a potential victim.
At no point in time did Mr. Jones, request an attorney or even imply that he wanted an attorney.
A big piece of this puzzle will be the body camera footage the police say they do have and will be releasing to us here at CBS 11 very soon. The evading arrest charge could actually come with 6 months in jail after he leaves the hospital. As far as the officer who pulled the trigger is concerned, Derrick Wiley, a 10-year veteran of the force, is right now on administrative leave.
So this police representative says that once he was detained, he tried to run away from the police. And apparently Lyndo didn't give Officer Derrick Wiley enough time to quote-unquote investigate him before he decided to have to shoot him. And then after they charge him, they violate his constitutional rights and go in there and interview him without his lawyers in the hospital. And when they're challenged on, breaking the Constitution that they're sworn to uphold, they have all kind of excuses for it. They say, oh, we're not interviewing them as a suspect, we're interviewing them as a victim. But if they're interviewing them as a victim, that would mean that somebody did something wrong here. That Officer Wiley is the perpetrator, but they're still justifying this shooting. And then they say, well, he never asked for his lawyers, but they never let his lawyers come in. Now, this brother, who was not a criminal, who was hardworking, who was a family man, had kids, luckily he survived it. And in this particular case, we get to hear the other side of the story about what happened.
Lindo Jones says the officer who shot him isn't telling the truth. Here's News 8's David Goins.
Lindo Jones can take a few ginger steps. Actually, just sitting up in a chair is major progress just 7 days after being shot twice by a Mesquite police officer.
I was scared, man. To be honest, scared.
Jones recovering at his Arlington home this afternoon, a day after getting out of the hospital and seeing a charge of evading arrest against him dropped. And for the first time this afternoon, able to share his perspective of what happened in Mesquite 1 week ago.
Had a flashlight in his hand and told me to get out. Opened the door and got out. Get on the ground. For what?
Jones was with his truck on South Town East Boulevard and could not get the alarm system to shut off. Mesquite police say Officer Derrick Wiley, a 10-year veteran, showed up to what he thought was an auto burglary in progress. It wasn't. Mesquite police said Tuesday, within seconds of officers coming into contact with Jones, a scuffle ensued.
I looked at the ground with my hands up in his face, and he shot me. You didn't give me no time to get on no ground.
The 31-year-old was shot in the stomach and back. He then spent the next 7 days at Baylor Medical Center, cuffed to his hospital bed. Late Tuesday, that evading arrest charge was dropped, allowing Jones to leave the hospital and recover at home. But Mesquite police said today they do have the discretion to revisit bringing back that charge.
Honestly, it seems as if this is an effort to continue to intimidate my client.
Jones is now a witness in an ongoing internal affairs and criminal investigation against Officer Wiley. Jones says he has lost more than a week of his freedom. He lost his paycheck, too. His job as a laborer in sandblasting is gone.
They don't make sense to me at all.
Tonight, his focus is on healing and getting back to work, but he wants that officer to be able to tell investigators what happened.
They should have went to him first. You the one with the gun. You with the power. I ain't got no power. I'm a citizen, a working tax-paying citizen.
So this brother who was in his own car, and the police showed up, they told him to get out. He said, I got out. And the police are supposed to tell you why they're detaining you, if they're detaining you. And so Officer Derrick Wiley, within seconds, decides that this is enough cause for me to shoot this man. And he shoot him before he decides to disobey or not, whether to get on the ground. And apparently from what they see from the body footage, it was enough for them to drop the charges that they had on him in the first place of fleeing the officers or resisting arrest or evading arrest. But of course they try to threaten him and hold it over his head and say, well, we can always come back and charge you for this. Now, this is just another example in a long list of examples of how our constitutional rights get violated every day. And thankfully, this man is still alive, but how easily things could go left. It doesn't matter if you're an upstanding tax-paying citizen or whatever. And I know that there are a lot of people out there that think just because you call yourself a different name or you go by something else that they will respect your constitutional rights, but that's just not true. This man was not breaking any laws, and they didn't give him time enough to explain he's sitting in his own car before he was shot by the police. They're not going to give you enough time to say, I identify as whatever you identify yourself as, because they see us as the same. And for us to be sitting here arguing with each other over simple things, while they'll come to each other's defense when they know they're clearly wrong, when they know they break all kind of laws, when they know that the public perception of it will be terrible, they still will defend each other. And believe me, they put so much energy into keeping us divided that we can't afford to waste any time dividing ourselves, arguing over trivial things. Now, we can't be surprised if this brother don't get justice, if we can't unify to stand up and take justice for ourselves as a whole, to stand up and have each other's backs. We're going to keep experiencing the same thing over and over and over. They can continue to do this because there's no consequences for their actions. When we realize the amount of power and control we have, especially over our own destinies, it'll be a whole new ballgame. How we have the ability to create our own schools, our own curriculums. How we have the ability to create businesses, not only businesses, but good businesses that can become successful. When we realize that supporting each other will not only destroy the system that we are living in, it will help us build the system that we need to be living in. It will help us create the nation that we need to create. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you do if you cannot protect yourself. If you're sitting in your own car, even if the car alarm is going off and the police can shoot you and then charge you with the crime, you cannot protect yourself. If you come into a community of people who work together and who exercise things like the Second Amendment right to the fullest, the police will be a little bit more hesitant to come into those areas and violate people's laws. Now, this situation could happen to anybody, and we shouldn't wait until somebody end up dead behind something like this before we decide to get together and march and be mad about it. We have centuries of history to be mad about. At some point, we got to start doing something about it.
All right, listen, we're here at Baylor Hospital. Some of you all saw on the feed earlier. There was last Wednesday, a young man by the name of Lindo Jones was shot while seated in his own car. He was taken to the hospital in critical condition. He's been in the ICU and he's been held for 6 days. The conditions in which he has been held is he was held in handcuffs. His family has been denied access to him. They contacted my office 2 days after he was shot. When they just learned about him being shot, I contacted Mr. Moore, who's a criminal attorney here in Dallas, and to discover what was the criminal nature of his charges. And he discovered that there have been no criminal charges filed against him. And so, of course, we demanded his immediate release from custody, that the chains be removed, that his family be granted access to him. When Mr. Moore went to visit him, he was being unlawfully interrogated by the Mesquite PD under the authority of the Dallas Sheriff's Department. And Mr. Moore had to be forcibly removed from the hospital. We caused a bit of a stir about it by calling the media, preparing a writ of habeas, and went back to see our client, and have moved him out of his bed.
Right.
And now we're trying to figure out where they have moved our client, who was shot once in the back, once in the stomach, who was unlawfully interrogated, who has been unlawfully detained, and they're playing hide the citizen.
This is the second time he's been removed from a room. The first time occurred when, upon hearing that their family member was shot, the mother of his child came looking for him at Baylor, and when she found him after the police wasn't providing her any information, after she found him on her own recognizance, they moved him. They moved him again today, but this is after I came this morning to speak with my client, and me finding out that he was being interrogated by Mesquite PD without my consent or his consent. I tried to end that interrogation immediately, and I was forcibly removed by Baylor PD. And since we've coordinated with Baylor Hospital since then, they're trying to allow us access once again. But once we get back to his room, he's moved. They moved him for a second time, and we don't know where he is.
So I've not seen any clearer case of constitutional violations. Not only do you have the excessive force where the client was shot unarmed in his own car, accused of being a burglar suspect, and the media misled that this man was shot during a burglary. He was then detained in the hospital. His family was denied access to him. They weren't given, as he was fighting for his life, they were not given updates on his medical condition. His doctor said that they were not allowed to give updates. And now he's been denied counsel and literally hidden. Like, they literally took him out of bed. I couldn't imagine anything more blatant, being more blatantly violative of the Constitution. And so we will keep you all updated. Share this video so that the word gets out, because if it's not reported the right way, then they continue to make up stories. To this date, the man has not been charged with a crime.
No charges.
And so I honestly anticipate that they will backtrack and attempt to make up charges, but we've been clear. Every law enforcement officer that we spoke with, and their justification for questioning him today was that he was a witness, not a suspect. So we expect this to be handled the right way. I want the identity of the officer. We want him immediately released from custody. We want the body cam and the dash cam. We want the body cam and the dash cam footage released to our offices so we can prepare for our civil suit, and we want our habeas petition granted immediately.
This evening, two starkly different accounts after police shot a man in Mesquite. That man now cuffed to a hospital bed with some serious wounds. Thank you for joining us. I'm Cynthia Aguirre.
I'm John McKay. Police say they were investigating a car burglary. Turns out Lindo Jones owned that car, and he was unarmed. News 8's David Goins live at police headquarters tonight, where the department answered some pretty tough questions today, David.
And there are a lot of questions, John, understandably, in an investigation like this. Mesquite police say they've actually learned more about the circumstances surrounding the shooting, in large part because they were able to interview the man who was shot, who is now recovering in a Dallas hospital room. That is Lindo Jones, and talk to him about that. More on that in a moment. We've also learned that the Mesquite police officer, who is now on administrative leave, his name is Derrick Wiley. He is a 10-year patrol veteran here with Mesquite police. Let's talk you through exactly what police are willing to share about the shooting investigation. This started when Mesquite police responded to a burglary call last Wednesday evening. Now, when officers arrived to a parking lot in the 1300 block of South Town East Boulevard, a pretty busy road here in Mesquite, they found Jones with the vehicle. All police will say right now is that they tried to detain him at that time, and a scuffle ensued, and Jones, who was not armed, was shot twice. On top of that, he now faces a charge for evading arrest. Now today, Mesquite police admitted that the car that was supposedly being broke into back on November 8th, in fact, belonged to Jones, but officers at the time didn't know that.
An individual in a car, it was nighttime, the alarm's going off, and we don't know what he's there for.
There was no justification for this man, who was an occupant of his own vehicle, to be shot twice without ever proposing a threat to Mesquite Police Department.
Now, Mesquite PD saying it's a bit too early to make that strong of a declaration, that coming from one of Jones's attorneys this afternoon, but they did concede tonight that there is a simultaneous internal affairs investigation and criminal investigation against Officer Wiley, who again is on paid leave while this is all going on. Again, that investigation, neither of them are complete this evening, but Mesquite police did say that their interview today with Jones in the hospital as he recovered, focused on the fact that he was shot by police and not so much on the evading arrest charge that they arrested him for that evening. So still an active investigation tonight.
New tonight, a local law enforcement officer is facing heat after photos surfaced of her apparently in blackface. The NAACP in York County is demanding that action be taken against the longtime deputy.
And 10 on your side's Liz Kilmer is live from the York-Pocosin Sheriff's Office tonight, where the sheriff addressed this. So, Liz, what was his response?
Well, Tom and Laura, in response to this, the sheriff says he is reassigning the deputy so that she'll no longer work in schools as she has been for the last 10 years. Now, he did defend her, though, saying that she's a kind person who didn't mean to offend when she went to a Halloween party this year dressed as an African-American congresswoman. With the signature hat and bright suit jacket, a York-Pocosin sheriff's deputy took things a step further while dressing as Congresswoman Frederica Wilson for Halloween.
She did not mock Congressman Wilson nor make any attempt to degrade her. Deputy Browning's intent was to simply portray Wilson as a political celebrity.
With her boyfriend dressed as President Donald Trump, Deputy Jean Browning was only trying to be funny, according to Sheriff Danny Diggs. But NAACP officials aren't laughing.
Is that blackface in and of itself is something that, should not be tolerated.
Brian Smalls, president of the local NAACP chapter, sent a press release to 10 on your side after meeting with the sheriff last week.
Essentially, our take from that particular meeting was that nothing was going to be done from an administrative standpoint.
Smalls said at a minimum he wanted Browning removed from her current assignment of teaching drug abuse resistance education in local schools. During a press conference Wednesday, Sheriff Diggs stated she will be and noted that he felt the two organizations were still going to talk and work together on a solution.
I felt that it was understood that I agreed that some type of corrective action would be taken in this incident. I did not hear back from the NAACP until 4:22 p.m. today, when I was notified by email that they were putting out a press release.
Diggs says Browning has been with the office for 20 years and that she's never been accused of racial insensitivity and that she's remorseful.
She now realized that in hindsight that she should have used better judgment.
Smalls says he hopes she learns from the incident.
This is a serious situation, and this is nothing to be taken lightly. This is not a game. These are, human beings. These are people that have feelings, they have emotions. They deserve to be treated with respect and dignity.
And we're told tonight that Deputy Browning won't be commenting. Her new assignment will be in the courts, where she apparently worked before becoming a DARE instructor. Now, meantime, I did reach out to the Congresswoman's office earlier today, and within the last 20 minutes, I received an email saying the Congresswoman has no comment.
Okay, so you haven't necessarily read the report, but you are familiar with the term black identity extremists?
Well, I think so, yes.
So can you tell me what that term means to you? Do you believe that there is a movement of African Americans that identify themselves as black identity extremists, and what does that movement do?
Well, I'd be interesting to see the conclusions of that report, but I'm aware that there are groups that do have an extraordinary commitment to their racial identity, and some have transformed themselves even into violent activists.
Are you aware of white organizations that do this as well? Given that white supremacy is well-documented, well-researched movements such as the neo-Nazis, the Ku Klux Klan, et cetera, are they white identity extremists?
I didn't follow that question, please, again.
Is there a term or a report on white identity extremists? You mentioned you were familiar with black people who identify with their racial identity.
Yes, but it's not coming to me at this moment.
Not coming to you?
It's
certainly a group such as the Ku Klux Klan.
Yes, and then the skinhead movements, but there's a racial identity white movements that have been identified for sure.
So has the FBI done a report on white identity extremists that are likely motivated to target law enforcement officers? Is there such
I'm not aware of that.
Okay, are you aware of a group called the Sovereign Citizens?
I've heard that group, yes.
And I believe that the Sovereign Citizens is primarily a white organization that absolutely has targeted police officers and killed police officers. You're not aware of that?
I'm not aware of all their crimes, but I know they're a group that's known to have violent tendencies.
Could you name an African-American organization that have committed violent acts against police officers? Could you name one today? In this report, they name organizations from 30, 40 years ago, but can you name of one today that has targeted police officers in a violent manner?
I believe I could, but I would want to be to confirm that and submit it to you in writing. But I believe we had, within the last year or so, 4 police officers killed by a group that some have described as extremists.
So what has happened is that there have been a couple of incidents in which African Americans did kill police officers who were not associated with a black organization. And so one, for example, in Baton Rouge was associated with Sovereign Citizens, which is primarily a white group. So you should know that there's a lot of concern in the community, especially from organizations such as Black Lives Matter. By the way, would you consider Black Lives Matter a black identity extremist group?
I'm not able to comment on that. I have not so declared it.
You wrong. You know you wrong.
In your mind, you believe he intentionally shot you? Or was it an accident?
How could it be an accident? You got a taser. You intentionally draw your gun because you wanted to draw your gun. I can't answer that. You gotta ask him. He know why he did that.
All right, and we back on the forecast. Now, regardless of the billions of reasons that our people have to work together to unify and do what we have to do, we still have to see scenario after scenario happen for us to decide to do anything about it. Now, out in South Carolina, there was a 86-year-old man that the police was forced to use a taser on. Now, Albert Chatfield, who suffers from Alzheimer's, is another clear example of how they feel about you and the amount of respect that they have for us. Now, let's see what could have possibly caused this 86-year-old man, Albert Chatfield, to be tased by the police.
Drive, I'll call it. We'll be out with something. Hey! All right, stop! You stop! No, you got to shoot. Stop! All right? No, you can't stop! All right? Stop! Tase me! Stop! Tase me! You gonna stop me! Stop! No, okay, stop! You gonna stop me! Stop! All right, you gonna stop me! Tase him! Tase him! Tase him! Central, I'm trying to get on the radio. We on Brooks and Main. Taser deployed. Subject in custody. Being arrested for taser deployment. Get him up out the street. Catch your breath. You all right? You all right? Get him on the phone. Ready? Pearson, move my car. Move my car out the street. All right, we need you to get up so we can move you out the street, okay? Come on and work with me. Stand up. Stand up. Put your feet down. All right, sit down. Sit right there on your butt. Let's go through notify EMS so that because it's also going to have the last one through the forehead. How old are you? How old are you, sir? Sir. Breathe. How old are you? That was rather than fight him out there in the street.
I understand.
That's the purpose of me telling you go ahead and take.
I understand.
He's got the loud verbal command several times. He's not followed through the loud verbal command. Pearson, come help me get these cars out the road.
Y'all put me.
Huh?
Put me down.
Put me down.
Help
We're
me.
trying to help you, okay?
Wait, let me down.
Okay. Hold on. I'm gonna get you on the bed here. You got an elderly male.
Put me down. Hey, bud.
Causing traffic problem.
Get me over. Get me over.
Officer Carter wouldn't respond. He wouldn't respond.
Stop.
He got in the car.
Down.
He decided he wouldn't stop.
No, sit down.
He finally stopped here. He jumped out the car trying to subdue him by hand without having to hurt him.
Yeah.
He's fighting. We got traffic coming up the street. We're trying to chase him and stop him. So we end up having to tase him to keep him from getting any further hurt. And he's got a laceration on the front of his head and one right here on the back. I can't think of his name right off the top of my head. He's probably got, I'm sure he got a wallet in his pocket. He's probably about 70. Yeah.
Like this? Stand down.
He's normally, he's very outspoken.
Y'all
and
pay.
standoffish.
Yeah. Y'all pay.
He came to the schoolhouse
Y'all pay.
a while back saying that when our
Y'all
officers
pay.
with us.
Y'all pay. Y'all pay. Y'all
traffic
pay.
collision paperwork. He's very outspoken. You can't tell him different. He's right about it.
You think he's hard-headed, or you think
he's very hard-headed?
Just take your hands. Hey, take your hands.
Look at him.
Y'all
Hey.
take your.
You all right? What happened?
I went. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to take you to the hospital, okay?
Yes, sir. Give me a second, okay?
Did we find out why he was running?
All right. Monday morning. Just give me a second. It's going to hurt just a little bit, okay? 1, 2, 3. All right.
That one's already out.
1. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Okay, hurry up, baby. Calm down.
Which camera?
It's on.
Nope.
This one, right? Alright.
Hey, calm down, baby. So you take your shirt off, okay?
Hold on a second.
Hold on.
Thank you.
Can you sit up?
Yeah, thank you.
I turned it on as soon as before you start pulling.
So this man, Officer Stephen Sweikata, says he tased this 86-year-old man for his own safety. He was forced to tase this man because he didn't want to get hit by a car. So apparently Albert Chatfield was driving his car erratically, running through red lights, and he didn't pull over right away. And when he finally did get out of the car, they said he was getting out of the car dazed and confused, which is expected of someone who has Alzheimer's, and that he wasn't following their commands, which I guess is like the ultimate sin in America, punishable by death or at least severe injury. So they say that Albert Chatfield was backing into traffic, and the only way that they could subdue this 86-year-old man was to tase him. And when he was tased, that's when he fell to the ground and hit his head, which led to him suffering from bleeding from the brain and a broken nose.
An
86-year-old who was tased by police in Kingstree in Williamsburg County 4 days ago is still in intensive care. The police officer says he used his taser to stop the man from being hit by traffic. But Brad Stryker tells us the man's family is upset and wants justice.
Jody Mack will never look at this intersection the same way.
I can't understand. It's not justified.
She's talking about what happened to her father, Albert Chatfield. 4 days ago, Chatfield was stopped by police at this intersection in Kingstree.
He was backing away with his hands up, and then he was tasered.
To find out exactly what happened here, I requested a copy of the police report from the Kingstree Police Department. Unfortunately, no one responded to my request, but I did manage to get a copy of the report from the family's attorney. In it, Officer Sweikata reports that Chatfield made several U-turns and ran a red light trying to avoid his patrol car. After Chatfield stopped and got out, he was walking back toward traffic. Sweikata says he used the taser because he was worried Chatfield would be hit by that traffic.
This is the place where it happened. I'm devastated by this whole thing.
Devastated especially because she doesn't think it had to happen.
If you don't see a gun, I don't see it necessary to pull a taser.
Chatfield was taken to the hospital after he was tased. He's been in intensive care ever since. The family says his condition is only getting worse.
Right now, the main concern is Mr. Chatfield.
This is Caesar McKnight, the family's attorney.
There was some carelessness on the part of the police department.
He says they're considering taking legal action, but for now, filing a lawsuit isn't their top priority. They just want to see Chatfield recover.
I'm praying. I'm not hoping, I'm praying that he gets better.
Prayers she hopes are answered soon. In Kingstree, I'm Brad Stryker, Live 5 News.
We sent multiple emails and phone calls to the Kingstree Police Department asking for a comment, the police report, and body cam footage of the incident. No one responded to any of our requests.
Now, I don't know how many people have actually dealt with anybody who has Alzheimer's. My grandmother had Alzheimer's. And anybody who's ever dealt with it knows how difficult it is to deal with. But of course, not following the police officer's commands is a death sentence waiting to happen, regardless if you got dementia or not. They hopped out and told this 86-year-old man, not knowing whether he has Alzheimer's or not, to get down on the ground. And after he didn't do that, they said he resisted being put in the handcuffs and taken to the sidewalk. And people with Alzheimer's do have that sort of response sometimes when you try to deal with them. But for these fully trained, tax-paid police officers to decide that the only course of action was to taser this man, to subdue him in order to help him out, do you think they would do that to somebody who looks like their father? No, but they have no problem doing it to this man. And the police don't even issue a statement about it. But the point is, if they can do this to this senior citizen, to this elder in our community, what would they do to black men in their 20s and 30s? Or black women, or even black children? Nothing is off limits with them. We can't be begging them for justice. We have to be the ones that protect Albert Chatfield. Now, luckily, this man didn't die, and hopefully he does recover. But the police, so-called protecting him, put him in intensive care. They had to put this man in an induced coma, thanks to the police looking out for him. And if you think there aren't people in these terrorist organizations intentionally going out to join the police force, then you are sadly mistaken. And if police officers can get away with murder or brutality, how do we know the good ones from the bad ones? Because they all seem to be immune. But instead of complaining, they are in the position that they are in, and they respond more urgently than we do. If they go out and join police forces, there's no reason why we shouldn't go out to join the police forces to try to stop the situation from happening from on the scene. If not, just create our own police organization just to protect our own community from whoever. These people in these terrorist organizations have no problem running for political office, and enough people support them that these racist officials keep getting elected over and over. There's no reason why we shouldn't be running for local offices in our own areas to control the local politics in our area, to control the DA in our area, the city council, the mayor. These people do group economics because they learn how to put their tribalism to the side. Now, we are in a position where we have no other choice but to do group economics to get out of the situation that we're into, but we still have problems with tribalism. We're still divided over simple things. When our brothers are shot or incarcerated left and right, when our sisters are being shot, when our kids, our elderly are being shot, we still arguing amongst each other. In my opinion, we already have enough motivation, enough reasons to work together. We all agree that we don't want this happening to old men in our community. We don't want our children to be targeted. We don't want to be targeted ourselves. We want our children to have a future of financial independence. We have enough things to agree upon to put our tribalism to the side. And our ancestors left us the blueprint on all of the major areas that we need to accomplish in order to achieve our goals. All we have to do is just follow them. When we realize all we got, then maybe we can get somewhere. But if centuries of the same thing isn't motivation enough, I don't know how much more it'll take.
All right, so there you have it. There are very, law enforcement is a dangerous profession. I'm the son of lifelong law enforcement officers. My mother just retired from law enforcement. And it is very dangerous, and we understand that. But there are very real consequences to these interactions. And this is a perfect example. And you have been able to see some of what the end result is when law enforcement officers don't have don't have adequate training and don't have an adequate understanding of when it is appropriate to use force. So at this point in time, I'll open up and I will take any questions. Jody right now is not going to take any, but the floor is you all.
When you look at that video, obviously this case was settled very quickly. Is that the reason why?
I think this case was resolved very quickly because of all the facts and circumstances. Of course, the video plays a role because there are no questions about what actually happened. And this is a recent phenomenon, so to speak, because there have been instances of citizen law enforcement interaction that go on where there is no video, right? But having videos helps parse through the weeds. It's also a perfect example of the plight of body cameras, right? Because as you know, in the wake of the killing of my other client, Mr. Walter Scott in North Charleston, South Carolina became the very first state in the country with mandatory body camera legislation. And body cameras work, but they only work if they're in working condition and if you cut them on, right? Here we were fortunate to have the entire event transpire in front of a police dash camera. But what if it wasn't? What if it occurred off camera, right? These are questions that a lot of citizens and communities have to deal with. Fortunately for Mr. Chatfield, he doesn't. But I think it was a mix of the officer's written report, which by its very nature, in our opinion, deems the actions unconstitutional under the precedent set by the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, the video, as well as the nature and severity of his injuries.
Well, he appears to be, as you mentioned, walking away and kind of disoriented. So why don't you want criminal charges?
Very poor decision making isn't always necessarily criminal. The solicitor's office in this instance did a thorough investigation. I have to commend Solicitor Finney's office on this. he is backing away, right? And you'll see when you have the opportunity to analyze the tape, there are a lot of things that could arguably open to perception. I don't necessarily agree, right? I don't see anything on the tape myself that allows anybody to say that Mr. Chatfield was aggressive or this reference in the report to a fighting stance, right? I see no fighting stance on the video. You know, it also speaks to part of the problem when looking at whether to charge officers, and more importantly than the charge is whether or not you can convict them, right? We live in a society where the average person finds it hard to believe that an officer could act with the necessary criminal intent, right? The mens rea to do something. You know, in Walter Scott, Officer Slager, who shot an unarmed man in the back as he ran away, and yet the criminal justice system was unable to convict an officer of murder. Had it been a regular citizen, it would have definitely been an easy conviction. You know, most recently there was a group who has proposed this idea that states, including South Carolina, create a separate criminal charge, right, for the unconstitutional, unlawful use of force, right, which will parse out the intent for assault and battery, right, the intent for manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, or murder. You know, but in this instance, the decision lies with the solicitor, and we respect his decision. Whether we necessarily agree or not is a different story.
My dad was very active. He supported everything we did as a family. My dad was like my best friend. We would go to games together. We would go to breakfast together. That Saturday morning, we had breakfast together. My dad and I, we would go to church together. He was very active. I don't have that anymore. My dad would dance with me.
So do you have to feel? I mean, what is his day? What is today like for him?
It's a long process. It's not what it was, but he will never be the dad I had before this. He requires to be fed. He cannot stand up on his own. As you can see, he clearly got out earlier, walking himself. He can't do that anymore. He can't even stand up because his foot, when he was dragged out of the street, his foot now is basically turned as to where he can't even balance himself. He has nightmares. He's up all night. We have round-around clock shifts with him. He's not able to have a full conversation with me anymore. At the beginning, he couldn't even speak. The only thing he said was, "Lord, help me." As he was crying out there, a day after that, he couldn't even speak. He can't eat. He was on liquids. He was on what they call thickened liquids because things were getting into his lungs. He couldn't swallow. So I don't have the dad I had before. And I may never have him again.
Huh? No, I just want, as long as you know, I'm good. I mean, it's only that. Well, you know. So when I get an infection, I'm an old man. I know. It's okay. I hope.
Right there where the police was just right there.
They talk to you?
Yeah, they said we couldn't get through because somebody had to show it.
No.
Oh,
no.
I'm sorry, where do you live? I stay on 12th Avenue, 207.
12th and what?
12th and 1st.
That's your ID? Did they talk to you yet?
Whoa. Yeah, they already talked to you. Why do you need my ID?
Who?
Why do you need my ID?
You're driving the car, that's why I need your ID.
What did I do?
Car park. I need everybody's ID.
What?
Everybody's ID.
Whoa.
Yo, you stupid as fuck, sir.
Hell yeah.
I'm about to start recording this shit.
Better watch your language. Get that film. Get that film. Get that film.
I'm about to start recording this shit.
Yeah, start recording it. Cut that phone off right
No,
now.
I have right. I'm not intimidated. I have right. Sir, I'm recording your ass. The fuck you gonna do? Bitch, you on camera. Fuck wrong with you? Stupid ass cracker.
This cracker, bro, you see how quick he ran to try to stop us when we
Stupid as
turned?
fuck, bro.
And he already pulled out his fire, he holding the fire shit. He was about to nah, bro. What the fuck?
Hey, get the paper.
My memory ID somewhere, dog.
Where you at? Come be on camera, sir. What's your badge number, sir?
606.
What's your name, sir?
Right there, Danish. F Danish.
What's your name, sir?
Oh
Get out of the
shit.
car. Get out of the car. Get out of the car.
Damn. What the?
Get out of the car. Yo, what the?
Oh shit. What the fuck?
Use your hands. Put your hands on the fucking thing. Put them on the thing. Put them right there. Put them right there.
Whoa.
Keep them right there. I'll put a round in your ass so quick.
What? What did I do?
Hands on the thing.
9 Investigates has uncovered 2 Groveland police officers could be in hot water for allegedly using excessive force against an 11-year-old girl.
They responded to a burglar alarm at a home in Groveland, and the girl says they forced her to the floor at gunpoint. Channel 9's Anthony DiLorenzo found out both officers have a history of trouble at the department.
The 2 officers came in through the garage door, reportedly let themselves into the house with guns drawn, responding to that burglary alarm. This soft-spoken 11-year-old, who we're not identifying, was on her bed watching TV and says she found herself in fear on the ground at gunpoint.
One of the officers was pushing me down, and when he was pushing me down, he put his knee on me, and then the other officer still had his gun pointed at me.
Their response was over a burglary alarm that was accidentally tripped. Ginger Rand wants to know how anyone could think his little girl was such a threat.
Someone should get fired for doing something like that to an 11-year-old.
After relaying his concerns to the chief and Eyewitness News began asking questions, Groveland police launched an internal affairs probe into possible use of excessive force. Career cops James Festa and John Rigdon have been with the department 3 years. I got a look at their personnel files today and found out they've been disciplined several times. Officer Festa was reprimanded this past December for botching a child abuse investigation. He's also been suspended in 2013 for sleeping on the job. Officer Rigdon was suspended last May and demoted in 2013 from corporal. Brass also reprimanded him in 2011. All 3 times he allegedly filed false police reports. Gerund wants IA investigators to scrutinize Sunday's police report, which contains nothing about his daughter's terrifying account.
She's traumatized by it.
Police are set to interview the little girl about what happened here on Monday.
Can you tell me what you were doing on Sunday afternoon?
I was laying in my bed and I was watching TV, and then I heard a voice and I thought it was my dad and his friend, Mr. Rob. And so then I didn't open the door or go out the room, and then the door slammed open, and then the 2 police officers yelled at me and told me to put my hands up, and then they told me to get on the ground while the one officer was telling me to do that while the other officer had his gun pointing at me. So then I went on the ground, and then as I was going on the ground, one of the officers was pushing me down, and when he was pushing me down, he put his knee on me, and then the other officer still had his gun pointed at me, and then they asked me if I was the owner of the house, and I said no, and then they got off, and then the other police officer got off me, and then that's when they went out in the hallway to go to my dad's room.
And how did that make you feel?
I was sad and scared.
And how long did this last for? Just a few seconds?
It was like, all of it was like almost like 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. Did they make you cry at all by what they did?
When I went to my dad's room, I started crying because I was very scared and didn't know what to do or what had happened.
Have you ever seen anything like that before, like on TV, or have you ever seen anyone do that to anyone before?
No, not really.
That was the first time you ever heard of police officers having to do something like that?
No. I've heard of it before, but I never really saw it on TV or it happened to me before or any of my other families.
All right, and we back on the forecast. And in these particular cases, I'm glad Lyndo Jones and Albert Chatfield are both still alive. And in Lindo Jones' case, we get to hear the other side of the story because we rarely get a chance to hear both sides. Whether he was a hardworking, tax-paying citizen or not, it didn't matter. We do not get the benefit of the doubt. And it don't matter if you're an 86-year-old man like Albert Chatfield and the police tasered him, leaving him in intensive care for his own good. And it shouldn't take death in order for us to unify, because in actuality, we shouldn't be taking any casualties. But in reality, we have hundreds of years of casualties. Either we unify and we build a nation and we empower ourselves, or we keep dealing with the same old thing for another couple hundred years. So, as always, man, we have got to start standing for something, or we're going to keep falling for anything.